So Iran's strategy in this war is simply to outlast the United States. And honestly, I think it's working. I mean, President Trump keeps threatening Iran that if they don't agree to our terms, we're going to restart the bombing, which is presented as U.S. leverage over the IRGC to come to the table. But what if Iranian leadership sees it the other way around, believing that Trump wants, even needs, an end to the war more than they do? That shift might give us an idea to the Iranian strategy playing out right now, and in turn, what to watch for and what to expect going forward. Now, there have been significant strikes carried out in recent days by the United States and Iran, all while this ceasefire is still in place. And something I want you to keep in mind as you watch any news coming through this conflict is the term escalation. Which side, the United States or Iran, looks like they are avoiding escalation at all costs, and which side looks like they're openly willing to escalate if needed to get their demands met. Now, it's not all black and white, but I think what we've seen in recent days is an Iranian willingness to cross that line over and again, because from what I can see, Iran believes they have the upper hand. Meanwhile, the United States, President Trump, seems very unwilling to commit overwhelming military resources to see this conflict through. Now, talking to the recent Iranian strikes, significant attack carried out in Kuwait. The Wall Street Journal said, quote, another skirmish in the Strait of Hormuz. After yet another skirmish in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran escalated on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. The regime fired ballistic missiles at U.S. forces in Kuwait and Bahrain and targeted Kuwait's civilian airport with missiles and drones. The airport attack killed one and injured more than 60, leaving a terminal in shambles. Mr. Trump called the Iranian attack not a big deal and an understandable tit for tat, but Kuwait said it received an estimated 30 Iranian missiles and drones. That's a pretty significant attack, 30 inbound enemy munitions. And again, just in Kuwait, I believe all of the casualties from that strike on the international airport, civilian infrastructure, no doubt, killed one and wounded more than 60. So for Kuwait, very serious. Now, the IRGC spoke about this, issuing a statement saying, quote, we have already warned that any aggression will be met with different and harsher response than we have already implemented. These responses should serve as a warning. We reiterate that any interference with the security of the Strait of Hormuz will cost the aggressor American military a heavy price. And this is what I'm talking about when it's not just words, but actions as well. But sticking with the words for a moment, we had Secretary of State Rubio speaking to the House and the Senate this week, where he was talking about the reaction to some of this, saying we have to respond. So when they hit us, we're going to hit them. And Iran's words, again, is that they're just going to keep escalating this. Right? They're going to find new ways to strike at the United States if the United States continues to carry out attacks on Iran. Moving back to the Wall Street Journal, talking about this Iranian strategy that is playing out right now, they say, quote, from the Gulf to the Levant, this adds up to an Iranian pressure strategy. The regime wants immunity for Hezbollah and a weak deal with Mr. Trump that commits it to nothing on the nuclear front beyond a false statement of intent, and it is showing its willingness to escalate. Mr. Trump threatens to do likewise, but after 2 months, his tough talk yields diminishing returns. He didn't act on his threats after Iran twice reneged on opening the Strait of Hormuz, or after the first, second, or third time it fired on U.S. troops. That's the only rational takeaway if you're Iran. Again, the Iranian regime is in a fight for their very survival, so they have to read into all of this stuff in an extreme way. Right? And what they are seeing is that President Trump, over the course of the ceasefire at least, which is now 65 days long, 55 days. I think we're coming up on 100 days of war since the start of the war here in a couple days. What the Iranian regime, what the world has seen is that President Trump has regularly made these very significant threats, eliminating the entire Iranian civilization, destroying their power grid, resuming strikes like they've never seen before. And to my knowledge, not one time has he carried through with those, or at least certainly not to the degree that the threat seems to suggest. So if you're Iran, at what point do you look at that and say that these are just empty threats? We, the United States and most of the world, I think, look at, Dmitry Medvedev over in Russia and making these nuclear threats, honestly, like every other month for the last few years. And for a while now, it's kind of been brushed aside. It doesn't even make the news anymore because everybody just understands he's crazy. He's not actually going to do anything like this. He's just rambling. You have to wonder at what point Iran looked at some of these threats from President Trump and said, he's not carrying through on these. there must be a reason we can push even further. Wall Street Journal article says, and all of these articles, of course, will be linked in the description below, says the regime seems to think the prospect of renewed war is its leverage over the United States rather than the other way around. Iran's leaders are now escalating their pressure on Mr. Trump because they seem to have concluded that the president wants an end to the conflict more than they do. This is the idea that the United States we have a ton of assets still in the Middle East, of course. To my knowledge, we've not really added more since the ceasefire went into place. Definitely restocked munitions and resupplied the forces that were there. Nothing's really left in terms of any significant numbers, and we're poised and ready to attack if needed. That's kind of been viewed as the big threat looming over these ceasefire talks. Iran, you better listen. You better agree to something. You better come to terms with a good deal, or else we're going to do this again. And the Wall Street Journal puts forward what I think is a pretty valid assessment here that's not working right now. That Iran views restarting the war as a negative for President Trump. It's not a point of leverage for the United States. It's the opposite. And I think we're seeing that play out in the United States right now. I think that is genuine. I mean, last night there was a war powers vote in the House. And so we've now seen the Senate and the House match U.S. public opinion polls showing disapproval for the war. The Wall Street Journal says, quote, the GOP-led House voted to restrict President Trump's ability to continue the war against Iran without congressional approval, a rebuke to the White House and the latest sign that Republican lawmakers' support for the war is eroding on Capitol Hill. The measure passed 215 to 208, with 4 Republicans joining Democrats in support. The resolution, which is unlikely to become law, directs the president to remove U.S. armed forces from hostilities against Iran unless explicitly also authorized by Congress, other than to defend America, an ally, or partner from an imminent attack. And look, I beat this drum for a long time. It's probably wish casting at this point, but I think all of this should be run through Congress. I think it's the rare exception, personal opinion here, but I think it's the rare exception where the president should be able to deploy troops to a combat zone and carry out military operations without congressional approval. And I think we've dropped that ball. The American people have dropped that ball in not holding our elected representatives accountable since at least 2001, right? The authorization for the use of military force. We've just carried that forward and keep using that model, whether it is the AUMF or something new like we're seeing right now. It's just a big failure in the United States. And that's not a Republican or Democrat thing. We've had a number of administrations, and even when administrations talk badly about that and say we got to do away with it, and they get empowered, and they're like, actually, this is kind of a good deal. We're going to keep it going. So it'd be nice to see that change, but that's not in the near term, unfortunately. Now, the rationale for voting against this measure, we heard a note here from Representative Michael McCall, a Republican out of Texas. He said, quote, it really undermines the president's leverage and ability to negotiate, because now Iran is going to see this and think that the United States, Congress, American people don't support it. But I think that's where we've been for a while. There's a lot of polls from a lot of different organizations asking questions in a lot of different ways, but I don't believe there have been very many consistent polls showing that the United States people are in favor of continuing the war in Iran. And this goes back to the opening days of the conflict where the people were not approached. Congress did not approve this. The president just one day, all of a sudden, we got notification, we're at war with Iran. And the approval from everything that I've seen has slipped steadily since then, to the point where we are starting to see even some people that were supportive of the conflict, or generally supportive of the president's policies, maybe is a way to put it, coming out pushing back on this. We had Matt Walsh, a conservative commentator, just a few days ago, starting to really get fed up with where this sits today. He said, quote, pretty much all of the prominent voices who supported the Iran war assured us that it would be over by now. None of them will admit they were wrong. Even less will they admit that their initial assurances were based on nothing but their own wish casting. This whole shit show has been an enormous waste of time and resources, and our country has not benefited from it at all. Its advocates have moved the goalposts repeatedly and have even to this day refused to clearly articulate what constitutes a victory and how we'll know that it has been achieved. The goalpost shifting has been wild, and I think we're going to see more of that in coming days, which kind of brings us to what to watch for going forward, with the idea that Iran is simply trying to outlast the United States. And what I would keep in mind, again, as we approach the 100-day mark of this war, is it is becoming increasingly likely that we're going to get some sort of weak statement in place of any real progress. It is just very hard to see, as the cards sit right now, that Iran is ready to give up anything, let alone move even further from where they were when this war began. So I would expect something like a very loose agreement, a memorandum of understanding is the term I've seen floated recently in White House circles, for no further enrichment, and that the two parties will work towards a deal. And that's probably about the extent of what we're going to get. Iran will probably sign that thing knowing that they're not going to abide by it, because again, from the Iranian perspective, they feel as though they have the upper hand. So we should expect Iran to hold out and probably try to push harder for what they think is it, or for what they want, and probably a safe bet that they're going to be able to withstand and endure the pain of this status quo longer than the United States. Now, the other major issue here, again, personal opinion, is this administration was so opposed and talked so harshly about the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that's not in the cards. Realistically, when you're talking about, I think that it should be in the cards as a place to maybe start negotiations from, but based off of how that's been presented by Trump and his allies in recent years, it's hard to imagine that they would agree to something similar to that. Unfortunately, the longer this goes on, it seems like that would be considered a win from where we sit today. Just look, I'm not seeing any concessions from Iran at this point, not one. All right. So what are we going to do? Bomb them, restart hostilities? Do we think that, a week, 2, 3, 4 weeks more of bombing is going to all of a sudden flip this 180 degrees? It's just hard to see it moving in that direction. So something like the JCPOA might actually be a step forward progress. But if we do that, what I would expect to see is maximum effort from the administration and the U.S. government put forward to make sure that it is viewed very, very differently. This is not the JCPOA. It is an entirely different deal. In fact, we already started to see some of that from President Trump talking about how he doesn't make bad deals, and whatever he agrees to will not be anything like the bad Obama deal. But as we sit here today, it's worth noting that since the ceasefire went into place, Iran has not conceded on any elements of these negotiations. Not one. They haven't given up a single thing. They didn't even open up the Strait of Hormuz, which was supposed to be a precondition for the ceasefire. So Iran hasn't budged. And the United States has regularly threatened to restart hostilities. We have carried out limited strikes here and there, and constantly threaten that if Iran does not agree, then we're just going to, turn back up the dial and go back to war. And then they're really going to be sorry. This time, it's going to be serious. Iran's not buying it, and they haven't been for quite a while. So I think we're in a bit of a tough spot here, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see, again, in place of actual progress, some sort of relatively meaningless memorandum of understanding sometime in the next couple weeks. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.